I'd like to thank Giorgio for the invitation and for organizing this beautiful conference.
Ok, fino dall'inizio degli anni 90.
Since the 90s, the only lenses available for lens substitution were monofocal lenses. Nowadays, we can find the refractive lenses that are chosen based on individual patients' requirements. They are called IOL premium or high technology IOLs. So we're talking about aspherical lenses or toric lenses and multifocal or accommodating lenses that were used a number of years ago, but they've now been abandoned. The toric multifocals are commonly used. It is estimated that between 15 and 20% of our patients could benefit from a high-tech lens. But the problem is that the NHS doesn't pay for that. The ophthalmologist, of course, would be able to provide all information on possible options to the patient, but they refrain to do so because the NHS doesn't pay for that. So patients don't have access to advanced technology. For cost-related reasons, access to innovative solutions is not offered to the patients. A personalized or customized refractive lens is the result of a multifactorial decision-making process. Of course, medical considerations, optical and anatomical data, patient lifestyle, costs of materials, more time required for imaging, and adequate discussion with the patient to establish their expectations and eligibility to these technologies. Dr. Mammone talked about intraocular inlays. We need to explain everything to the patient. Patient requirements are sometimes not always perfectly understood by the patients, and the patients may be dissatisfied with the results of surgery. But in some cases, in spite of us providing all necessary information to the patients, they have expectations, hidden expectations that are not disclosed to us, and therefore they're not satisfied with results. The aspherical premium IOLs, as a matter of fact, all the monofocal lenses that we implant are aspherical. They are made based on a technology which reduces the corneal spherical aberration, which is a condition whereby the focus of at the periphery of the optical system form in the way shown in the slide. There is a positive or negative spherical aberration. The positive aberration is normally induced by the cornea with the mean value of about 0.27. The natural lens in a young person induces a negative spherical aberration, which partially compensates for the positive aberration induced by the cornea. The result is a positive spherical aberration 0.10, which is optimal because mild spherical aberration can be beneficial because it increases depth of field, i.e. the distance between the nearest and the furthest point that can be clearly seen without spectacles. Traditional IOLs are no longer used because all IOLs implanted nowadays are aspherical IOLs. And so this problem has been solved. Let me now briefly talk about the correction of corneal astigmatism by implanting an IOL. When faced with a patient to be operated on for a cataract, we need to try and understand their requirements. Patients want to have their presbyopia corrected or not. If they don't want to have correction, we can give them a monofocal IOL that can be either toric or not, depending on whether the patient's astigmatic or not. But if the patient wants to have presbyopia correction, then we need to understand as clearly as possible what their needs are. Does the patient need to have good distance vision or good intermediate vision, the computer, to be able to use intermediate distance most of the time? So we'll be implanting a multifocal lens, either toric or not, depending on astigmatism, with a lower addition for near 150 or up to 250 diopters. If the patient needs intermediate and near vision, then we have third-generation multifocal lenses, the so-called trifocals, that allow for good distance and intermediate vision, 80 centimeters, and even for near vision, and can also correct astigmatism. In modern cataract surgery, emmetropia is the aim of our intervention. The presence of astigmatism often negatively affects our results. It is estimated that 20% of our patients has corneal astigmatism over 1.25D and 10% over 2D, and at least 20% of our patients would be eligible for toric lenses. But as a matter of fact, the number of patients implanted is never higher than 4.5% due to high costs for toric IOLs, and also on account of the fact that many surgeons are a bit reluctant to submit patients to additional examinations to establish the toricity of the lens to be implanted, and also because the National Health Service doesn't always offer coverage for these lenses because they're too expensive. Why should we implant a toric lens then? In order to obtain independence from spectacles. 90% of patients implanted with toric lenses versus 80% of patients with non-toric lenses reach 20/40 uncorrected visual acuity. The toric IOLs give better visual outcome with multifocal lenses. The visual result can be impaired by astigmatism, and they provide better visual performance. What kind of toric IOL to be implanted? With a diameter over 11 millimeters, with better rotational stability. Acrylic hydrophobic material favors adhesion to the posterior capsule and better lens stability. The design can either be C-loop or plate haptic. Both designs give good stability, rotational stability. The toric IOL models available, some provide cylindrical correction, the posterior side of the IOL. Some provide bitoric correction on the anterior posterior side. And another type of lenses are positioned at 180 degrees because the design of the lens is toric. And we have to implant the lens on the 180 axis, but the design is toric. Inclusion and exclusion criteria. Patients that have astigmatism over 185 diopters, as for an astigmatism below 1 diopter, there's variability, postoperative variability in the axis. Of course, we need to operate on normal eyes. They may have a keratocone, but it has to be stable, or they have to be stable corneal transplant patient. And you can see patients are not included that have a number of contraindications. How should we proceed? Very accurate calculation of patient biometry. Dr. Sabini, in fact, provided information on how to calculate biometry. The patient must have correct positioning, must be correctly positioned. Measurements are repeated, and measurements must be repeated with different instruments, and results have to be compared. We shouldn't forget about surgically induced astigmatism. That must be taken into consideration. The main incision axis has an impact on residual astigmatism. Marking must be very accurate. Nowadays, we use digital systems, as shown by Dr. Mullaroni, for better measurements, and they're very easy to use. You can see the variant system that provides a picture, a photograph of the cornea. We can see the incision axis, the astigmatism axis. These images can be obtained preoperatively, and during surgery, we have a connection to the operating microscope. We can use a flash drive or a Wi-Fi connection, so we can reproduce all our measurements on the microscope. This is the patient. We project the capsulorhexis. Dr. Cavallini talked about the importance of capsulorhexis. With this instrument, we can project capsulorhexis. You can 5.5 millimeters at the green circle, and manually we can proceed to capsulorhexis, which stays within this frame. It has to be centered, and it is very important because we can obtain better IOL centration and obtain correct IOL positioning with respect to the diameter. At the end of phacoemulsification, the lines appear, which indicate the astigmatism axis to be followed for IOL positioning. And these two lateral notches we can see on the IOL, we can see show perfect alignment with the preoperative axis. Complications. Complications are due to undercorrection, overcorrection, but basically are correlated with the misalignment and the IOL axis rotation postoperatively. This is an example. A patient of 63, myopic, astigmatic, toric implant was as follows, as you can see on the slide. The alignment axis was 84 degrees according to the variant. On the first postoperative day, she had 10 on the operated eye with no correction. Unfortunately, the patient, she came for follow-up. She was very happy. We were very happy with the results. And I told the patient she could, live a normal life. But I forgot to ask her what her normal life was like. She was an extreme yoga teacher. Two days postoperatively, she was upside down on her head, and the next day she realized that there was something wrong. And after a week, she was back and she said, "Doctor, I can't see very well anymore. You're joking. After 7 days, you should be all right. These lenses in the first few days have very good stability, so they're quite unlikely to displace after 7 days." As a matter of fact, the patient had 14 degrees displacement from 85 degrees. The patient had rotated. So the rotation was 70 degrees. So there was a considerable change in astigmatism, and the visual acuity had already dropped to 6/10. She had to be taken back into the OR. That was done straight away. So the operation was not very challenging. You can see this is the axis that we had to reach. While the lens had rotated 15 degrees, the anterior chambers filled with viscoelastic substance, and using hooks, we rotate the lens. For this particular type of lens, the rotation must be nearly 180 degrees, but the axis will be then realigned along the right axis, and she went back to 10/10 visual acuity, and she was told not to practice any yoga for 2 months. In conclusion, corneal astigmatism can be surgically corrected in different ways. We can perform corneal release incisions either manually or with a femtolaser. We can use limbal release incisions. We can perform excimer laser keratectomies. All these methods have limitations with respect to the degree of astigmatism that can be corrected, and mechanical corneal instability in time. The toric IOL implant is a reliable surgical option, in my opinion. We need to aim at rotational stability in time. 1 degree of rotation of the IOL axis results into a loss by 3.3% of cylindrical power, and over 30 degrees of rotation leads to the total loss of the cylindrical power. Important role plays by rotational stability that can be obtained with the right design. Recent studies show that the cylindrical power reduction never exceeds 0.5 to 1 D in 90% of cases. So 90% have 0.5 and 80% have 1 D. Thank you very much for your attention.